Press the button like that, it will go red, ready for speaking.
The right one.
Yeah, the one on the right, and then so just
Good evening, members. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Nduko Akushku, who is going to read us thoughts for the day this evening. He is, by the way, the chairman of the Basingstoke African Caribbean Catholic Association.
One of the remarkable things about Baka in the amazing Basingstoke community is that it enables us to embrace and help people in a way we couldn't as individuals. As Baka, we come together as an association based on our common faith and heritage. Although we have a lot in common, we are also culturally diverse. Embracing diversity is one of our biggest strengths, and I believe that our ability to embrace diversity and thrive as a group is a reflection of the wider community that we live in. We are indeed stronger together. In line with our faith, which teaches us to love our neighbor as ourselves, our key message today is that we must not be separated in interest. Neither should we be divided in purpose. The popular saying that life is always better when we are together because there is so much strength in unity proves that collaboration and integration are ingredients that will make us thrive as a community. We may have different religion, different languages, and different skin color, but we belong to one race, the human race. Therefore, our strength lies more in differences than in similarities. So we must continue to build and reinforce bridges of friendship across our community. It is said, if you want to go fast, then you can go alone. But if you want to go far, you must go together. Together we can accomplish much more than we can as individuals. Borrowing the words of Nelson Mandela, our differences are our strength as human and as an amazing community, amazing stock.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. I haven't run through this before, but I will tonight, in case we've all forgotten the fire evacuation procedures for evening meetings. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building. And the fire exit located to the rear of the room, go down the stairs and meet in the very wet Moore Memorial Park this evening. And members, please note, we're webcasting tonight. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones or whatever apparatus you're using tonight. Start off with apologies for absence. I have on the agenda items Councillor Bowes, Councillor Tom, Carruthers, Grant and Councillor Court as being absent tonight. Are there any other absentees? Councillor Gavin James.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Apologies for Councillor Ron Hussey.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Councillors Ashfield and Williams.
Thank you. And Councillor Myers-Brown.
Councillor Sam Jeans, just for lateness, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest on items on the agenda this evening? There are none. Minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of February. I will move that those minutes will be signed as a correct record. The only part of the minutes to be discussed is their accuracy. Are there any comments?
Second.
Thank you, and I will sign them after the meeting. Announcements. Yes, I have one. I'm sorry?
Mr. Mayor, it was a question I had on the minutes. There was a question, and I just...
Would you like to stand up, Councillor Boy?
Question 6, sorry, on page 24.
Of the minutes?
Of the minutes, yeah. Portfolio holder's answer states that he presented to the local ward members of Councillor Ramallini and Councillor Jeans, but no mention was made of the third ward councillor Councillor Howard Sorrell. So does that mean the minutes need to be amended, or was Councillor Howard Sorrell excluded from that ward presentation?
Councillor Carr?
Forgive me, Mr. Mayor, that was an accurate representation of what I said. It seems that I misspoke and that all three ward members, to my recollection, were invited and attended that meeting.
So we should include the third member.
If we're talking about accuracy, that is what I said.
okay.
But if you're talking about a reflection of the meeting held, then you could add the name in. It's up to you.
Okay, understood. If he misspoke, that means we record the misspeaking. So your point is made, but it will not change the minute.
I'm happy to accept that.
Thank you. Right, announcements, I'll move on. I've got one announcement, and it's, as there's no other time to mention this before the event is the coronation. All members will be aware that their local communities and parish councils and whomever can apply for a coronation grant. 6 have been applied for already to the borough, and there's a small amount of money available to help them celebrate the King's coronation. But what I'd like to do is address all councillors to ask them to identify the local celebrations in their wards that are taking place to celebrate the King's coronation. They may not have applied to the council. This can include street parties, community centre or parish organised events. The idea is that myself, the Mayoress and the Deputy Mayor and Deputy Mayoress will be visiting as many of these events as possible to recognise the efforts of our communities on this auspicious occasion. Please advise the mayoral coordinator of the location and timing of the events. And I just remind you the coronation grant is still available. Councillor, the leader.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to update the figures because I had an update earlier today, and the number of applications currently is 40.
Thank you very much. I certainly did not anticipate that, but mine was a reasonably recent figure, but thank you so much for that. Councillor Radican.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask that, I don't want to put upon you and the Deputy Mayor, but would some sort of borough photographer be useful to take pictures right across the borough for the coronation? Because I think genuinely people would like to see what's going on in other wards.
Certainly, and I take that on board. You'll probably note that certainly during my year, photographs of anything that I attend, and even the Deputy Mayor, if he's standing in, we take as many photographs as we can with the permissions that are necessary on occasion, and we publicise them as widely as we can in both the local press and on the borough websites. Of course, anything between now and the elections, it's not going to happen because of Purdah. But certainly in that final week before mayor making, we'd like to celebrate the coronation. But it's recognised in the communities is the important thing, because people are going to be putting a lot of effort into this, including my own, and I want to try and give them some recognition in a way. This will be, I should think, mainly on the Sunday, the 7th of May. Councillor Putty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are some streets, like in wards, they are going to organize their own festivities for this occasion. And the thing is that, but some of them would require some sort of funding. So how do they really, if they are doing small one, how they can reach for the funding?
It's my understanding that the communities can apply for this just as well as the formal communities of parish councils and community centres. So you've had the information, Councillor Putty, so please encourage those people to go ahead and apply. Give them a hand. That's what we do as councillors. Thank you very much. Move on to, and I know the Deputy Mayor doesn't, does the leader have anything to say? Fine. Thank you. Going to question 5, the questions from, item number 5. Questions from members of the public, there are none. None have been received. No petitions. Moving on to agenda number 7, resignations and appointments. Shake of the head from the leader. Anybody else? Group leaders? Nope. Thank you very much. Move on to agenda item number 8. This is the pay policy statement. And as per the usual, I believe the Chief Executive is absenting himself as the head of the paid service. And I will move this from the chair.
Second, Chairman.
And are there any speakers? No speakers, are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Move on, and if you could advise the Chief Executive, please. And I will move on, notwithstanding the monitoring officers just left. Agenda item number 9 has been withdrawn. And we move on to members' allowances scheme. And if you would note, please, that recommendation, I think that's the case. Yeah, number 4 has been withdrawn. If you look at the appropriate recommendation page for this particular item. Again, I will move it from the chair.
Seconded.
Yes, certainly, we'll get the page number. 129? 139. 139. It gives a list of new numbered recommendations. Number 4 has been withdrawn. Is everybody satisfied with that? And do I have any speakers? If there are no speakers, are we agreed? Councillor Phillimore, you've got to be quicker than this. I'll move right along.
Can we ask why it's been withdrawn?
Can you say? No, the recommendation has been withdrawn. It's related to the Constitution. So that has been withdrawn from the agenda. So the recommendation number 4 is not applicable. Are we agreed on this agenda item? Thank you very much. Councillor Phillimore.
I'd like to cast a vote against.
Is that a motion to? Oh, you are fair enough. In that case, any more against? Everybody else in favour? Then the motion is carried. Right, on that basis, because of that one vote, is there anybody abstaining? Nope. Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item number 11. Notice of motion to end fuel poverty. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And you have 5 minutes.
Hopefully I won't need that. I'm sure we're all aware of the impact of the cost of living crisis. Fuel poverty is defined as when a household can't afford to keep its home adequately warm. I am dealing with an unprecedented number of housing cases, as I'm sure many of my colleagues here are as well tonight. Many of these relate to mould and damp, exacerbated by high fuel prices, leading to colder homes. It is a hidden problem. Most people don't like to come forward about it. Fuel poverty has risen in the UK from 6.1% of households when I first got elected to Brighton Hill South in 2016 to 13.4% now, less than 7 years later. It disproportionately hits the elderly and vulnerable. I have cases with sheltered housing where at least 2 housing associations involved where the rent rises have been capped but the service charges have gone up massively, in some cases by as much as 400%. This means many of our most vulnerable elderly residents are facing destitution and or financial ruin. In one case, a resident on £907 a month is having to give over £700 in rent and charges to the Housing Association, with what's left having to cover food, clothes and any essential services not covered by the service charge. These people need our help right now. We've had presentations at the Climate Emergency Map about our two busiest housing associations, Sovereign and Vivid, and their plans to upgrade their homes to be more energy efficient and carbon neutral. This process will take years and we don't have that time. I would therefore ask that this council takes a proactive and cooperative approach going forward, with a council leader, whoever it is after May, taking a lead on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman, is Councillor Freeman still seconding this motion? Okay. And do you speak now? Or is
I'll reserve my right to speak, thank you.
Councillor Eaches?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillors McCormick and Freeman for flagging up this really important issue. We acknowledge that many people are finding things tough at present and recognise that some residents are struggling. I'd like to highlight a wide number of actions that we are already taking to support people living in Basingstoke and Deane at this difficult time. There are also a number of national initiatives and payments that we have supplemented locally. In addition to the cost of living assistance scheme that we launched last year, there are a number of actions in our adopted climate change strategy which seek not only to reduce carbon emissions but support residents in saving money through improved energy efficiency. Indeed, these and other actions will be the focus of our recently announced 6-strong green team, which will begin to support communities from early summer. As regards financial support to respond to fuel poverty, we already facilitate a number of grants and loans to residents through initiatives such as the Green Homes Grant, the Boiler Upgrade Grant and the Energy Company Obligation Offer referred to in the motion. These have been in place since before the cost of living crisis, and we will continue to seek further funding opportunities as they become available. Encouraging residents to take advantage of these opportunities will be a particular focus of the Green Team when they arrive, supporting residents in making grant applications, signposting and hand-holding them through this important process. Recognising that many of our residents live in rented accommodation, we have good working relationships with the local housing associations, and they recently spoke to councillors who sit on the climate change map. And this was about their programme of improvements to invest in their homes and support residents who are facing issues. Sovereign Housing Association and Vivid have both made commitments and adopted strategies to improve the energy efficiency of their housing stock within the borough. Vivid's sustainability strategy sets out their plan for net zero, becoming a zero carbon business and being a sustainable business partner, and it sets out their plans to ensure that all homes are of an EPC rating of C or above by 2030. Sovereign's investment strategy sets out their plans to be net zero by 2050 and sets out how it will invest to replace or refurbish its low-performing stock as per its home and place standard, so its entire stock will meet these standards by 2050, and we of course will continue to work alongside them. The Council has ensured that the housing element of the household support funding passported to us by Hampshire County Council has been focused solely on assistance with energy and utility bills, with particular emphasis on, where possible, on those struggling with damp and mould in their accommodation. Our housing standards team has taken a positive approach to overseeing and enforcing standards in the private sector market, ensuring that private landlords maintain their properties with a routine check of all EPCs when they undertake inspections to ensure that their homes meet the minimum standard, as well as having the ability to take enforcement action if during the inspection officers find there is significant risk. Within the Council, we have established a cost of living working group chaired by the Executive Director of Corporate Services. This is tasked with considering and actioning measures the Council and its partners can take to support our communities who are in need of support, and I will ensure that all the points raised in this motion before us this evening are considered by that group, particularly in respect of the services that we deliver, the support we give, and our partners who also provide this. So, Mr Mayor, as you can see from everything I have said, we are already taking the issue of fuel poverty extremely seriously. We are leading the way in this, and we are tackling this in as much as we can. And therefore, on that basis, I cannot support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Slimmon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm probably going to annoy a certain gentleman on my left because I'm going to talk about experience. Many people in this council will be aware that Citizens Advice in Tadley has been doing advice sessions for members and officers to be aware of what Citizens Advice can do. Citizens Advice in Tadley have an energy advisor currently, which was paid for with a grant and which will continue with the cost of living money that we have received from this council. I know that this council has done a great deal, and I would hope that this can be supported across the benches. So I am surprised that we haven't just got support at the moment. Later, Paul Harvey is moving a motion on child poverty. I think what we have to remember that it isn't just children that are poor in this borough. Citizens Advice nationally have just reported that 50% of the people that come to them with debt are already in a negative budget. So there is absolutely nothing that they can do to help them out of debt because they don't earn enough to be able to pay their bills. We need to look at things in a round. Yes, we need to improve the homes, but we also need to reduce the cost of energy that people do have to use if you're old and vulnerable or ill, and you have to have heating in your house. We have missed the boat. 2000, I got involved in a greening campaign based in Petersfield. This borough joined it only a few years ago. That would have been, if we'd have delivered it properly, and meant that our houses were already fit for purpose and the cost of energy would have gone down. I'm an unpaid director of Cleaver Community Energy. The cost of renewables is not going to go down a great deal because it is linked to the gas and oil prices. And until that link is actually removed, it is going to continue to stay at a high level, and people cannot afford it. People cannot afford to pay for the energy that they are using now. And obviously, we do need to get a proper joined-up strategy so that we can actually deliver what people in this borough need and across the country. And the government need to think about removing the barriers to more renewable energy. One other thing, and I'm going to be political. The Liberal Democrats at their conference at the weekend moved a motion that they are going to request at the general election that we have a basic guaranteed income so that everybody will have at least enough money to be able to pay for their basics of life. Now, obviously, those basics will need to be decided in due course, but I think everybody here would believe that it is only right that people can afford to eat, they can afford to heat their homes, and they can afford to put a roof over their head. More people are coming to Citizens Advice now than have ever come before. Many are families that are both working. Many have never had to seek help from Citizens Advice before, and they are coming now, embarrassed that they having to come along. Our food banks, as everyone knows, are oversubscribed with people trying to find enough food for a week. Our food pantry, people in Tadley are coming to the food pantry as well. And these are people who are working. I think we need a total rethink. We need to sit down and produce a proper strategy so that we all know what it is we need to do and how we deliver it. Based on what we are already doing, which is a good thing. I'm not knocking what we're doing, and the cost of living is going to carry on into the future. But other schemes will probably end, and people will be left in a desperate condition, and nobody can help them. And I would commend the motion, and when you come to Councillor Harvey later, that is another aspect of it that is disgraceful in this country in 2023. Thank you.
Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I do recognise Councillor Slimmon's experience with the citizens' advice in Tadley, and I do respect her opinion and thank her for the words that she's given today. With regards to Councillor McCormick's motion, I do welcome the motion and I stand to add my support to the spirit of it. No one in today's society should be faced with the choice of heating or eating. My colleagues across the floor, though, will be encouraged that the news coming out from central government today, with news of £1.4 billion in new funding being allocated to local authorities, providers of social housing and charities to upgrade homes and off-grid households with energy efficiency measures in conjunction with an additional £1.1 billion in match funding for social housing provided by local authorities, providers of social housing and charities, bringing the total investment to £2.5 billion to upgrade social and private homes in England. The money will go towards improvements to vulnerable households and off-gas grid homes with an EPC rating of D or below, and is projected to save tenants between £220 and £400 a year on energy bills. I do also note this Council's announcement this morning regarding the creation of our Green Team, which I believe is one of the first of its kind in the country, being created to proactively help our communities and companies to cut their carbon footprints and make changes to be more sustainable by providing advice on topics such as saving energy. I am particularly encouraged at the role of the Energy and Sustainability Advisor, which will provide advice on energy-saving measures, signposts to support and offer guidance, including grant applications and understanding utility bills. Improving the energy efficiency of Britain's drafty homes and buildings is the best way to cut energy bills permanently, while also boosting the UK's energy security and reducing carbon emissions. Today's announcements will rightly prioritise those who need support the most, low-income households and social housing. I am encouraged we have the additional funding being provided from central government and the beginnings of a team who will be focused on reaching out to our most vulnerable residents. And I believe we can work together cross-party to look to do what is best for our residents. I look forward to hearing Cabinet's approach to improving the energy efficiency of our homes and protecting our residents from rising fuel bills and the cost of living crisis. Whilst I support the spirit of the motion, I cannot support and vote for the motion because I believe the responsibility lies with others. But thank you again, Councillor McCormick, for bringing this. Thank you.
Councillor Radigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to say much, but I do think it is an important issue, and I would like to highlight some of the difficulties in the rural communities where the main source of power is not mains gas, but is oil. And that poverty is endemic across all communities, not just here in the town, but across the rural communities as well. I further note that we did have from Tadley Citizens Advice a benefits first aid meeting last night. Unfortunately, and I look at both sides of this chamber, there were very few of you councillors attending it. I think genuinely that would have been of benefit to you all to understand what the Citizens Advice do, what help they can provide, and what their integration in dealing with fuel poverty and debt, as Councillor Slimon has rightly pointed out, because it is important you know where to go for your residents. So I have to say, one of the things I'm disappointed is the people who didn't bother to take the time to realise what they could do for their community.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, there's another motion on the agenda this evening that I'll put later regarding child poverty. But I just want to pick up the point quite rightly that Councillor Slimon has started to outline and that Councillor McCormick raised in his opening speech and words. There is something, I think, far deeper and far more serious going on in our communities that sometimes we take note of. And I think the work we do is tremendous. I don't doubt the work, the authority, the officers, and to be fair, what Councillor Each has set out. I don't doubt that at all. I just think the challenge we're facing at the moment is so great and so significant and so serious to so many people that unless we pass motions like this, unless we show the level of commitment, action, not just agreeing to the spirit of something, but saying, actually, no, we're going to do more. We're doing lots, we're doing tremendous amounts, but we're going to do more. We're going to take this further. We're going to take this on and listen to what you're saying, because you've got direct casework that relates to the issues we're facing. I think that's really important. I get the money that's been thrown at this by government, you know, the 1.8 billion, the 2.5 billion. That's only going to do 115,000 homes across the entire country. There are 4 million homes in social rent in this country. It's only going to touch just over 100,000 of them. Yes, it's money, I get that. Yes, it will do good for those 100,000 people who have the homes that need the insulation. But there are millions more that need to be brought into this equation. Now, we can't, obviously, in our wards, in our borough, do that alone for our communities. We have to work with our social landlords. It's also worth saying there's 1,600 social landlords across the country. You split that 1.8 billion up between local authorities and those housing associations, and it isn't going to be a lot of money that they're each going to get in the context of the social housing that they've got. So just putting all that to one side, I think it brings us back to what we can do together. So yes, that money's on the table. Yes, we are doing something. Yes, other partners are doing something. But the question is, what more can we do? Because the level of crisis is so great. And I just take one example of a case in my own ward of a house with damp and mould that has taken the family months to get through the system, to fight the system, with the support of us as ward councillors doing the work with them to fight the system, to deal with the damp and mould, to get the insulation into their home. And they were having to use the food bank, and they were having to use all those other services because they were having to make those choices between do we heat or not. And if I do heat, because the home has got no insulation in it, I'm losing it and it's costing me a bomb. The other thing that's come up in casework and was an issue I dealt with recently was the idea of those prepayment meters. And that isn't connected necessarily directly to the motion, but it is something that many of our residents have faced. The imposition of those prepayment meters by companies that should not have been doing it in the first place, and the debt that's associated with that, and the issues that's associated with that. This is so layered. You could just cut this through so many layers of the issues that our residents are facing. So I welcome the motion, I welcome the spirit of the motion, but more than that, I want the action, and I agree with the action you're trying to push forward. I just think we've got to be together, stronger in the action we take, and not just support the spirit of something. I get it, but let's all together go forward on this and do something about it.
Thank you. Just to remind you, there's about 3.5 minutes left. So, Councillor Morrow, just bear in mind, I've got one more speaker after you.
It's very quick. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. For anyone who did miss the course, Citizens Advice do put these on throughout the year. You can also sign up to Eventbrite, which is on your mobile, online, and they give stats throughout the year. So I've listened to some of them. So just for your information, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Keep it brief. I'm sitting here with one of our web pages on our council web page, and I can see at least 8 streams for funding, with mostly grants, mostly for EPC ratings D or below, some for all ratings. And I just think we need to be really clear, don't we? There is a lot of money out there, and Councillor McIntyre has made it really clear that there's more money coming down the track. I think we have to be really focused on action, and I just want to be really clear that that's what the Green team is focused on, because the most important thing is there is no point having 8 schemes on our website if we can't convert it to action and energy efficient improvements in homes in our borough. And I think we should all be really focused on supporting that, supporting the Green team and making that action happen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. No more speakers than that. Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall be quick. There seems to be some sort of discrepancy here, but with people saying they support the spirit of the motion, they like what we're saying. I think this, I would like to commend, as the motion says, we note the good work that this borough is already doing. But there's more we can do. And I think what this motion is seeking to do is to say, yes, we've done good, we've done well, but there is more we can do. And this is a motion that ties together the existing measures we have and to seek to work on future measures so that this situation doesn't continue. It's not really more I can say. I hope you can support the motion, and that you know, you can see that we're not trying to denigrate or take away from the work that we already do, but we're trying to say this is great, but we need to move it forward. And this motion does try to tie that up and work on a future strategy to complement what our officers and this borough are already doing for people who are suffering in fuel poverty.
Councillor McCormack, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, yes, I too sense I think there's a bit of a disconnect going on here. This motion isn't intended to criticise what the council's already doing, but the problem that I've identified needs a resolution, needs a long-term solution, which is what this motion's aimed at. The examples I've cited in my speech tonight are people who, in spite of the Green Team, in spite of all these notices on the website, are in such dire straits that some of them are, you know, they can't afford to live in sheltered accommodation. Some of them have got nowhere to go. I've got a 90-year-old constituent who's going to move out of sheltered accommodation and live with a son because he can't afford to live at home. And I would like to commend the officers who, when I mailed them offline with very short notice, have come up with action plans to go into some of these sheltered accommodations and offer help and advice, because asking a 90-year-old who's not web literate to go on the website and apply for a green grant when they're living in sheltered accommodation and it's not within their gift to start actions to make the place that they live more green. I think there's things that just aren't understood that are underpinning this motion. This is why I brought this motion in front of you, because it's patently obvious to me that in spite of what we're doing, we still have people that are in such a bad position they can't afford to live because of their fuel bills. And that's in spite of things like the energy price guarantee. That's in spite of things like the £400 that the government have put in their bank account. So I'm immensely grateful for the officers who've put together an action plan at very short notice. And it's not just me, there are councillors in other wards and other parties that have had similar things, and other boroughs as well, that have picked up on this problem. And it is an extreme problem. We can't be complacent about this. That's why I want you to vote for this motion, because if you don't, the people out there aren't going to say, oh, well, they supported the spirit of the motion, but they can't support the letter of the motion. They'll just think, you don't care about fuel poverty. So I would urge you to support this motion. If you support the spirit of it, why can't you support the letter of it? Thank you.
Councillor McCormack, thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded, and we'll be putting this to the vote. We have vote up, please. Is that it? And thus the motion is carried. Thank you. Right, moving on to agenda item number 12, notice of motion, community asset transfer policy, and Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fellow councillors, the motion before you, as printed on the agenda, is for Council to make steps towards the creation of a community asset transfer policy, which I will refer to as a CAT policy. Many other councils have already have CAT policies, and I believe Basingstoke and Dean would benefit from having one. Community asset transfer is the transfer of management and or ownership of public land or buildings from its owner, usually a local authority, to a community organisation for less than consideration. The discount is based upon a presumption of long-term local, social, economical or environmental benefit. A community asset is a building or piece of land that is used to further the social well-being or interests of the local community. Currently in the borough we have a community assets list, you may recognise some of the assets on the current list. From Whitchurch, we have the cricket ground, Daniel Park and the Silk Mill, amongst others. Pubs such as the Red House in Highclere, the Red Lion in Overton, the Fox Inn, North Waltham, the Camrose Stadium is listed, Overton Primary Swimming Pool, and then in my own ward, 24 Swan Street, which I've been campaigning to keep within the community for approaching 2 years now. But this motion is not about one issue affecting people in my ward. It's about improving the asset transfer process in the borough and providing a clear, fair and transparent policy for everyone involved. It would provide a clear timescaled framework for officers and cabinet members to follow and offer support to community partners who wish to apply for a community asset transfer. Basingstoke and Deane have a large property portfolio to manage. The property services team do a great job managing their financial side of the portfolio and identifying assets that are underperforming. A cap policy can run between the property services and the community team. It can identify any beneficial community transfer options and be open to community approaches. It could be a proactive approach, reaching out and enabling our communities. Milton Keynes Council developed a CAP programme back in 2012 and have further developed their policy. It includes the transfer of public conveniences to parish and town councils, which is applicable to our borough. A fair, clear and transparent policy would help the negotiations between the borough and the parishes. Currently, Milton Keynes have successfully transferred 27 assets from 69 applications. Proven CAP applications are not always accepted, but the successful cases do prove their worth. In my ward, there's a great opportunity for Kingsclear Performing Arts Youth Centre, community interest company, to take over 24 Swan Street. The future social economic value of their project to the borough would far outweigh the loss of the capital receipt of a private sale. I've been part of the campaign to save 24 Swan Street since June 2021, and feel that both the borough and certainly the tenants would have benefited from a cap policy. I will put it over to the floor for discussion and opinions on whether other councillors feel a cap policy would be a good step. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Basham, will you speak now or reserve?
By right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Reserve? Okay. Councillor Isaac.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Yes, councillors, I'm happy to confirm that a draft report on council-owned community centres has recently been discussed at senior officer and cabinet member level, and it is proposed to go to CEP in the new municipal year for comment. It is intended that this will provide this council with the basis for a detailed CAT policy.
Thank you. Councillor Redigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted that the administration have picked up the baton on this, and obviously I support a policy going forward. We do have a large property portfolio, and it is right that we review how some of that may be moved to the communities in the future. I'm delighted that Councillor Morrow has supported us on the last two transfers. The one at Swan Street was done before he was a councillor, so he is undoubtedly particularly efficient at this. So I look forward to him helping us in any other way in the future. So thank you.
Councillor Mearsbound.
I just wanted to add, because I absolutely support this motion and I'd support the words that Councillor Morrow and everybody else who's spoken has said very positively. But I think there's also something, isn't there, that we need to ensure that's in the policy, which is we're very, we're in a great position as an authority, having so many community assets and assets that the council owns, that we have different organisations, whether it be charities or voluntary groups in, Mr. Mayor. And of course, I think sometimes we forget how much those assets cost to maintain and upkeep. And I think there's also that reality that there is a responsibility on us to ensure in that policy that we give support to those organisations so they fully understand the responsibilities and liabilities that they could be taking on. Because I think the worst thing that we can do is be very positive about it, which I know some local authorities' policies are, without being very real about it, to say, actually, this is the true cost of taking over a community asset, and therefore what you'll need to do as far as fundraising and financial planning to be able to look after it in the future, because I think the worst thing we could end up with is then having to negotiate how we take it back.
Thank you. Councillor Basham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't need to read all of this because you've got a policy coming, which is great. Thank you. What I would like to do is just say I'm delighted to second Councillor Morrow's motion this evening. I'm a big fan of cross-party collaboration. I'm also a big fan of communities taking ownership, delivery of local services themselves. So this policy is important to me. I first became aware of 24 Swan Street when I tried to rent an office there for my business back in 2019. I'm delighted that the dance school down there and the businesses down there have survived 4 years of uncertainty around that building. I think that's remarkable, especially off the back of COVID as well. I think it's, I'm really delighted to hear there's a policy coming. I respect what Councillor Minus-Bound has said about the costs of upkeep of the buildings. I think it's very important. I did a bit of research on it. I just wanted to share with you about how some of this works. I went up to Councillor Frost after the last meeting and congratulated him on his question about the discount that might be offered to the community in Kingsclere. He was under the impression that there's an algorithm, but he didn't know what the algorithm was. So he said that the head of property services might know. I went and had a chat with the head of property services, who looked at me blankly and said there is no such algorithm. What I also found out, though, was that whilst the council has an obligation to achieve best value under the Local Government Act, there's also this derogation under the General Disposal Order 2003, which allows a council to discount a building by up to £2 million for an asset of community value, whether that's societal or economic or environmental benefits, which on the face of it is great. I mean, for 24 Swan Street, I don't think the building's worth £2 million. It's probably worth less than £1 million. So, you know, we're in this position where we could actually give some of these community assets away to the community, subject to what Councillor Minus-Bound said. Some sort of Robin Hood economics could be on the horizon, who knows. I think what's important here is that there's no, from my perspective, and I believe that Cabinet approved the sale recently. I can't find any details about the discount other than it's been delegated to officers to negotiate. I don't know if that's correct or not. Maybe someone can fill that in for me. But I think I really supported the motion to have a policy, and certainly to include in that policy, you know, wouldn't it be great if we could have some sort of algorithm or some sort of guidance that would help us to just put a finger on how much societal value there might be in things. I know that's a phenomenally hard question, but at the moment, you know, we're in a position where if a deal can't be done between officers and the community in Swan Street, in 6 months' time it goes to the open market, and that would be the wrong outcome. And I think everyone in this room believes that would be the wrong outcome, if I'm not putting words in your mouth. So I would just please ask that the policy tries to address how we might quantify societal value and how we might put timelines around this stuff so that our communities can really seize the opportunity when it comes along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morrow to sum up.
Well, this is really good news. It's a bit of a problem for me because I had a speech for the second half. But it's still applicable, some of this. There is a big difference between community right to buy and community asset transfer. And community right to buy is a preemptive legal right pertaining to communities. It's a legal thing. It's not something we do as a borough, you know, to try and make something happen. It's just what anyone can do. Yeah, it's legal. So I'm really happy that, you know, we're going to move to a situation where we're going to try and work with people. And one of the things I will have to say is communication is so important in this policy. And very kindly passed on this policy here by locality, Power to Change, which really incredible group and brilliant. I already was aware of it, but I didn't manage to find the correct one. And it's all there, and you just have a quick read through it. It's really good. What I have to say on behalf of 24 Swan Street is what we've heard tonight isn't a reflection of what they've had on the ground. They've had 2 years, when I've been known, where they're uncertain about their building. I see John Ossett shaking his head there, right? I went to Kingscliff Parish Council meeting on Monday where one of the directors hasn't slept for 5 days because she's still not sure that our council is going to sell to them. And that's because it is a 6-month period, and you started that 6-month period without telling them the price. So I'm not, that's the truth. That's what the people on the ground are feeling, and I've had this for 2 years. Okay, so I'll leave it there, and I'm really happy that you're going to come up with a policy. I think it's a good thing for the borough. Thank you. Cheers.
I get the sense that we've got an agreement across the council. Are we agreed on this motion? Thank you very much. Motion's carried. Move to agenda item 13. Notice of motion, child poverty in Basingstoke and Dean. Call on Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Child poverty is increasing in our borough. Over 5,000 children are now living in poverty, according to the charity Action for Children. But there are many complex reasons why child poverty exists and is increasing, and we need to understand why if we are to better identify what we can do to make a difference. There is a tremendous amount of good work being done in our communities. It matters to recognise the work, but to acknowledge that we also can do far more. Working with our communities is also an essential part of any action we might take. Working with our partners is often the case that we are the ones who can bind their many moving parts together so that we multiply the good work that is going on in our communities, that we create stronger coordinated partnerships that can actually do that more that we want. For me, child poverty is something that we should be ashamed of. And here in Basingstoke and Dean, we have the means to do something about it. There simply is no excuse. Think of the assets that we have at our disposal, the community centres, the staff, the resources, the links and partners we work with. Our many community centres can be hubs of activity. Indeed, many already are. They are the focus points for coordinating services. They are the islands of hope for so many people. Linked to that work are the local churches and local voluntary community groups, and we have a patchwork quilt of amazing things that is happening. But it's our assets that can unlock the answers. It's our assets that could be the route out of the crisis for many people. I also think it's about the way we can work. We need to challenge the usual approach to problem solving in our community, which traditionally sees service providers and decision makers focus on the problems of neighbourhoods and communities, without necessarily connecting with those communities to understand what is already going on and what can be made better. The narratives that dominate the conversation about the poorest neighbourhoods in our borough to often find themes such as antisocial behaviour or isolation, crime rates or lower health outcomes, to name a few. Now, if we only focus on the problems communities face, we only ever expect those problems to return. I'm not talking about simply plugging the gaps just because county and other agencies have cut back their services, and they have. We've got to be about more than that. We need to be about lasting results. We need to see the wider picture to get a better understanding so that when we talk about solutions, they are grounded in the community. It cannot be about us doing to communities. We have to work with them and be a part of them so that when we do, embeds itself and it becomes something of the community. That's why we have a role here. That's why we are best placed to bridge that connection. Think about the questions we could be asking ourselves. What is best done by those communities themselves? Yes. But what is best done by those communities with support? And what do those communities need from outside to help them? More often than not, if we take the time to look, we will find community-led initiatives that are already coming up with solutions from within, but they're struggling for resources, they're limited in scope because other funding has been pulled from them. Their resources are short, removed after a period before they're really ready to stand on their own, and many fall over. We will find organisations and charities working in their own little silos, doing what they can, and they do make a difference. But they're on the front line of this issue, and I have respect, total respect in the world for what they do. But we know that we need more if we're going to make a difference to the life chances of these children who are living in poverty. The cuts we have seen over many years to services that did make a difference, that supported and lifted many children out of poverty, have now left a legacy following the cuts. Those services aren't there anymore. Those support for mental health services, or access to quality food, or support for parents, support for young adults to divert them from bad choices they might make. We know the services are stretched and they are breaking in many cases.
You have 1 minute,
So
Councillor.
what can we do? How can we empower communities? What difference can we make? I want us to be able to say in a few years' time that we did work to focus on and tackle child poverty and we made a difference. That the figures of children living in poverty in our borough came down. That the level of aspiration those children had increased and that the communities felt empowered. That we listened and we acted, that we worked in partnership, yes, with organisations and authorities to make a difference, but that we built the relationships, that we enabled it to happen, and that we built capacity. I guess the point for me in writing the motion is that we know the pandemic has had an impact. We know the cost of living crisis has had an impact. We know those cuts to government services have had an impact on young people. And it's really been a many difficult position before all of that happened. It was already a difficult position, but that has made things worse. So when you roll up all those challenges that they face, I hope you will share the aspiration and support the motion and bring your ideas to bear on what we can do together, working with partners, our communities, collectively, with all those other agencies and authorities to tackle child poverty. Because if it's continuing to increase, it's a disgrace, and it has increased. That's why we see the 5,000 that the Action for Children charity referenced recently as being yet another increase in our borough, and that's shameful. So let's work together to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turstein. Do you want to speak now or reserve?
I'll speak. Thank you. Poverty is being unable to afford the essentials. It's about going without. It's being hungry. It's being cold. It's being dirty. Poverty is about missing out. Poverty is about worrying where you're going to get your next meal, to heat your home or how to get about. Poverty is about cutting back. It's cutting back on food, on washing, on new clothes, on presents, on treats. It stops people joining in. It stops people taking part. It stops people contributing to society. Poverty is having anxiety around providing for your family. Poverty is feeling hopeless and seeing no way out. Poverty is feeling embarrassed or getting angry at the world and those around you. Poverty is relentless, it's invasive, and it's damaging. Poverty spreads through families and relationships. It limits personal and economic growth. Poverty damages us all. One aspect of this is when children live with poverty, it often leads to missed school. Attendance at school for pupils living with disadvantage is worse than for others. According to the LSE, over 28% of primary and 40% of secondary pupils who qualified for free school meals were persistently absent during the 21-22 autumn term. Now, although this has got better since the pandemic this year, individual trusts are reporting that half of their poorer pupils are still persistently absent. If a child is not at school, they do not learn. Children living with disadvantage persistently have a lower attainment than those without, keeping them at a disadvantage. Now, there is some support out there for families, but it can be fragmented. It is difficult to find out what is available and how it should be accessed. Waiting times for CAMS and cuts to children's services at county level mean we need to work smarter now more than ever. We need a consistent and accessible approach to service provision across the borough. We need to create an equitable environment for everyone, shifting focus to areas where it is needed most. We need to see Basingstoke Council work with all partners to create a seamless offering for our families. And this must start at the beginning of a child's life and be there to provide the support when needed. Now, we don't need a strategy, we don't need another policy, but we do need a clear action plan with measurable deliverables that shows results for our borough. Let's not let poverty impoverish our borough. I urge you to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mabunadeni.
Sorry. Unwavering support for the motion on child poverty. It's a matter of grave concern that plagues our humanity, and we can no longer turn a blind eye to the pernicious impact on our society and our children. Mr. Mayor, it is disheartening to acknowledge that some of our children are trapped in this poverty. It's casting a dark shadow on our society. We must recognize they are the architects of our future. And we have a profound moral obligation to ensure that they are bestowed with every opportunity to flourish. Sadly, this is impossible if they are struggling for their basic needs, such as shelter and food. The effects of children poverty are profound, extending to a child's education, health, and future employment prospects. This perpetuating insidious cycle of poverty that's challenging to break. As a community, we have a moral obligation to address child poverty and collaborate to provide our children with the resources they need to thrive. We must ensure that our children have access to affordable housing, nutritious food, and support for families who struggle financially. While the statistics mentioned in the order papers are concerning, I would like to draw your attention to some more detailed analysis, which is shocking. According to the Child Poverty Action Group, children from Black and minority ethnic communities are worst impacted about this child poverty. The staggering figures are 46% of these children living in poverty, and in comparison with 26% with the majority of the population. Such inequality is unacceptable, and we must take urgent action to address this. Mr. Mayor, it's not all doom and gloom. Looking at the bright side, Hampshire County Council, of the few councils in the country, they have been awarded as outstanding children's services for quite a number of years. To put in perspective, they are spending almost £1 billion per year on children's services, which includes education, out of their £2.2 billion budget, which is more than 40%. This is a lion's share of the share is given to these children. And with a figure of almost 40 million just spending for homeschool transport, which is going to estimated to increase to 60 million in next year, and they are not backing away, and they are doing it, and we are fortunate. And with the help of DWP, it is not stopping there, and they want to address everyone there. So that is why they introduced Connect for Communities grant, which is catching all the people who slip through the net, and it's acting as a safety net. And I encourage our community to make use of this Connect for Communities grant to catch all these people and serve these
You have
children.
1 minute, Councillor.
Although we have limited influence
as a borough councillors here, what we can do is we can take some actions, considering the number of dependent children while assessing our community, our cost of living assuring fund, and asking our member of parliaments to be more flexible in how we deliver our children's services more efficiently. In summary, I fully support this motion. As a double hatter, will continue to voice my concern at the Hampshire County Council, and I encourage my colleagues to join me in supporting the motion on child poverty, as we cannot plight of children living in poverty. Every child deserves an equal opportunity to succeed, regardless of their background and situation. I would like to express my gratitude to Councillor Harvey and Councillor Tustin to bring this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. We have 15 minutes left for debate. I have 7 speakers. So, speakers, just try and keep your points fairly short. It's in fairness to your colleagues within this chamber. Councillor Vokes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am in no doubt that every councillor in this chamber is concerned about child poverty and the potential damage child poverty has on their health, education and achieving their life aspirations. Tragically, child poverty is often linked to higher risks of poor health, crime and addiction in later life. So anything we are able to do to practically support children and their families who are living in poverty or to avoid poverty has to be a good thing for us to do. In Basingstoke and Deane, there are a range of services for families provided by Hampshire County Council from the Honeycomb Children's Centre. This is not necessarily accessible by all, so it is complemented by services and activities at community centres owned by Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council, as well as many other community buildings across the borough, including community schools, village halls and church halls. The Borough Council owns 23 community centres, which are managed by independent community associations. Many of these offer services specifically aimed at supporting families facing poverty, including support for parents, activities for children and young people, food pantries, and supporting with cooking on a budget. Children and young people's mental health and well-being has been identified as a key priority for local health services, and significant additional investment in local services and school-based mental health support has been confirmed for 23-24. In addition to this, both the Integrated Care Board and the Borough Council contributes to the core costs for the Youth Counselling Service, YPI Counselling, a charity providing mental health and emotional support to young people in the borough. We've also made available targeted grant funding in the borough. The Cost of Living Community Fund has assisted local not-for-profit organisations, providing support to residents with cost of living, and is about to launch again a second round with a further £95,000 available. In addition, the Council's Cost of Living Assistance Fund offers one-off payments to households to help with the rising cost of living. 1 million of funding has already been allocated to households, and we have a further 1 million of funding included in the 23-24 budget to continue the scheme into the next financial year. Hampshire County Council offers funding to support families through the Household Support Fund and Holiday Activities and Food Programme. This enables the provision of food and fuel vouchers to help with housing costs, free holiday activities for children and young people in need, as well as food pantries. Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council administers the Household Support Fund through the allocation of food vouchers to those households who are in receipt of pension credit, guarantee credit and local council tax support. Our housing team also administers an exceptional housing costs element of the funds through payments to households for support specifically with food or utility bills. Vivid and Sovereign Housing Associations were also allocated funds to provide payments for food or utility bills directly to their own tenants, together with a targeted focus on households struggling with damp or mould issues. It has been confirmed that the Housing Support Fund will continue in 23-24, although the breakdown of local district allocations has not yet been announced. I would also like to highlight that the Basingstoke and Dean Local Children's Partnership is run by the Basingstoke Voluntary Action and brings together a range of partners, including Hampshire County Council, with a focus on children, young people and families.
You have 1 minute, Councillor.
Thank you. The partnership considers what support is available and opportunities to collaborate to further develop local services. Within the council, there is a cost of living working group which considers the range of support available to residents, including ways to keep people informed about what help they can access. So while we are doing a lot to support children and their families experiencing poverty in the borough, and Hampshire County Council has the primary responsibility for children's and social services, we should always ask the questions, is this enough? Can we do more? Therefore, I welcome this motion to test and explore what more we, as a borough council, can do to alleviate child poverty. I recommend that this is taken forward as a topic for consideration at the CEP committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have 9 minutes left with 6 speakers. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to shorten my speech just for the benefit of everyone else, but I had quite a speech going. So I'm going to give my full support to this motion, and whilst the bulk of the motion regards children in poverty, I wanted to highlight just some of the cuts, the effects of the cuts to CAMS and Children's Services itself. I'd like you all to cast your memories back to around 2016, a time that the Conservatives would have spent a year in power after the power sharing with the Lib Dems, and they were starting to continue with their cuts to services across the board. It was around this time that we noticed that my eldest daughter was self-harming. It was clear that she needed help, but what I found was that this help wasn't very forthcoming. We found an endless wait for CAMS assessment, and appointments were given depending on severity, with that severity being from bad to very bad. And at the time, it didn't seem that her needs were important enough. If we fast forward to 2017, this lack of support meant that things had been bottled up for a number of years. And she was finding it very hard to deal with her issues, so much so that she actually tried to take her own life on numerous occasions. Whilst this bumped her up the scale in terms of getting assessed, because of the lack of facilities in the area, she was kept in the children's ward in Basingstoke Hospital for observation and then discharged to await counselling. It wasn't until we were unable to keep her safe in her own home that CAMS had to take action. She was placed in a unit on the East Sussex-Kent border, about 2.5 hours away from Basingstoke. Now, I consider myself one of the lucky ones, and considering the circumstances that we were in. At the time, my work afforded me the ability to take time off or finish earlier, but many parents of children that were in that unit at the time were just not able to do the same. They were travelling as far as Norwich to visit their children, and it was just simply unaffordable to travel all the time. But my daughter needn't have been there had CAMS been provided the correct funding to be able to support her when she needed it most. Nearly 5 years on from leaving the high dependency unit, you would have thought that things had got better. Unfortunately, they haven't, and we need to act now. The second example that I'd like to raise pertains to the fact that I'm the father of a disabled daughter that attends a school near Reading. We've seen considerable cuts to children's services over the years, and I've seen a steady decline in the services that she is afforded, from the escort being cut to her transport, which I pay nearly £300 a month for, the escort cut overnight because it was deemed that she didn't need it, and I've had to fight for that to be replaced. This week alone, her transport has been cut at short notice, meaning that she hasn't had education, or I've had to give up work to travel all the way to Reading and back again, which is about an hour and a half round trip, to get her the education that she needs. Now, I don't blame officers and the case officers at HCC. The staff there are stretched beyond belief. And without it, you know, again, I consider myself lucky because I'm able to support her. I work from home and I can, you know, travel in and my work is in a position to allow me to do so. But there are thousands of children, many in Winklebury and Manydown, that simply cannot do this because of the cuts that have been inflicted and because of the poverty that they face.
Less than a minute,
yeah.
Councillor.
So I support this motion and I hope that other members can do so. Thank you.
Councillor Laura James, and we have a total of 5 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I just wanted to sort of think to think about the reality of 5,000 children in poverty. I mean, that's shocking, isn't it? It's an absolute crime. But I think what I want to focus on really is those 23 community centres that we have within our assets. I am a chair of one of those community centres, the Hall for All, and I wanted to talk about some of the positive work that we're doing there, but also what we could achieve and what more we could do, you know, to address some of these needs and really the gaps in services in many of those other community centres around the borough, but also that we need to map what is out there and map what is going well and which is working and what is not working and where there are gaps and what we can do. And I suppose the action plan and this strategy is that this is what this is about, that we really need to have an understanding of what's going on. But within the Hall for All, we have health visitors, we have the midwives, we also have the CAB on a weekly basis in the Hall for All. We have we have a nursery in that community centre. As well as that, we also, and there's a low-cost nursery, we also have a facility for people to come and drop their children and play, which is a very low cost, once a week, and it works really well. We've got a charity shop. We've got so much going on, but there's also so much more that we could do and we would want to do within that community centre. And I'm sure, looking at the other facilities within Norden, we have a community school, a community building there. They do some great things, but they could do more. We have another community centre within the ward that needs to do a lot more. The other issue really is about community centres, and not all of them have managers. Now, if they don't have a manager, can they actually deliver some of these services? Do we need to have managers in place and staff in place to be able to facilitate the services that we need within these community centres? But for us to reflect on, and we can talk about some of the great stuff that we're doing across the borough, but it's not enough, is it? If the ongoing reality is we see year on year the stats rising and there's more and more children in poverty, it's an absolute disgrace, and we should be absolutely ashamed of ourselves in this borough, and a very wealthy borough that we have. Thank you.
Councillor Kewitt, and you have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Thank you to all the previous speakers and an excellent motion. I completely support it, and we've had some very first-hand experiences. There's clearly something that we can do better, and I really commend all the proposals that have been put in the motion. Anecdotally, I had a case of a resident in Basingstoke very recently, which would completely echo what Councillor Lee's experiences are, with a child in a very serious position, being part of a domestic abuse case, was self-harming, and I've been trying to help them access mental health support, and it's been an absolute nightmare, and we haven't been successful. And just really to echo what Councillor James says, we're a very rich council. We have huge reserves. We seem to add money to our reserves every year. And
1 minute,
I just
Councillor.
think instead of cutting the money to amazing third sectors that do so much in our borough, we should be adding and increasing the grants we give to organisations like YPI, amongst others, because they're all desperate to give the support to our young who desperately need it, but they don't get the support from us. Thank you.
Councillor McIntyre, you've got half a minute if it's of any use.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I want to thank my colleagues for bringing this motion. Much like the previous motion, I wholeheartedly support the spirit of the motion. However, unlike the previous motion, I very much believe this is in our purview and is an area where as an authority we are empowered to make a positive change. The cost of living crisis means many families here in the UK struggle to eat. Food poverty is a real challenge in our country and we need to do something about it. I can't stand here and give you the answer on how we address this. Poverty crosses political and societal lines. However, I'm happy to stand here in support of this motion. I look forward to a cross-party approach to come up with an answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey for a sum up.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and can I thank everybody for the collaborative approach and the comments that have been passed in the debate this evening. I think that's a reflection on us in this chamber on how seriously we do take this issue, and I welcome that. When I got involved in politics just over 30 years ago, one of the big issues then was child poverty. Massive issue. And it just strikes you how here we are stood now saying 5,000 children in our borough are in homes and households living in poverty. Now, the figure alone is scary enough, but think about the context in which that sits. Think about the examples, the experiences that those families and those children are going through, the way that will affect their lives, the way that will change their lives, the life chances they will not get because of their experiences. You've all said it this evening in terms of the debate and the experiences that we're sharing. It isn't for those people in CAMS working in CAMS. They are great people, but they haven't got the resources and they haven't got a hope in hell of coping with the level of workload that's coming at them at the moment in time. That's the reality of where we're at this. I think the situation is that people in our borough are getting support and they do get help from a variety of sources. Councillor Vox's list was excellent, but it still doesn't scratch the surface of really what we're dealing with. The endemic issue of child poverty is there and it is really hurting so many families and households at this moment. Our 23 community centres really could be those islands of hope. We see examples of it. How we then share that best practice around the borough, how we can get those services across those community centres throughout our borough is a real challenge and something we should take on. One of the very best things that was done many years ago, the Every Child Matters programme, the Every Child Matters agenda, was something that made a genuine difference. I will forever and a day, and this is political points, the only political point I'll make, when the children's centres were shut down, that did so much damage to those kids. I remember knocking on a lady's door in the New Horizon. She got a brand new house and she was a new mum. And her experience of going to the children's centre to get the support she needed was great. The change was, well, we'll offer it to you online. We'll get you the support on the end of the telephone. Rather than going somewhere with a programme that brought her into contact with other mums who were going through the experience she was going through. And the change was the Honeycomb Centre was going to do it all out of Buckskin. Don't worry, it'll all happen out of there inside. It never did. It never did. It could never replace what we lost. And yes, there are different models out there, and yes, we may have differences of opinion. But what I'm asking for, in a sense, is not that we find a sticking plaster for the moment, and my goodness me, don't we need it? What I'm asking for is that we try and do something long-term, that we try to genuinely understand what's going on in some of our communities and come up with something that's going to last, that isn't going to get changed in 4 years or 5 years' time, but something that can genuinely do something for the generations that are coming through. That's why I think this is so important. And thank you for your collaborative approach to this evening. And I really, really hope that we can all seize the agenda and bring that figure down. I do not want to see 5,000 children living in poverty. I want that to stop there and it to come down. And we can do something about that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Members, I sense once more that there's agreement across the chamber. Are we agreed on this motion? Thank you. Motion's carried. Moved, and well done, by the way. I thought that last motion went very well. Agenda item number 14, questions from members of the council on notice. There are 9 of them. If people would like to read all the words, well, they have the prerogative. I would please, I think we can all read. And question number 1 from Councillor Jeans to the Cabinet Member for Resident Services.
Thank you, Chair. As our Mayor said, you can all read. The importance of this question is that many of our residents are incredibly concerned about this move to digitisation from Hampshire County Council, and we need to be able to support our residents and make sure that they can receive the visitors that they require to their homes to take care of their caring needs, etc. So if we could really push Hampshire County Council to address what's lacking in the new policy, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bean.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Jeans, for bringing this question forward this evening. Hampshire's parking team are aware that there will be vulnerable customers in all areas of the county, and to assist with this situation are introducing carers permits for both professional carers and family members or relatives, which will be free of charge. They can request these via the My Permit system, which can then be managed on behalf of the resident. There is no limit on these per property, so if a resident has 6 carers a day, for example, each carer will be able to request a permit. This should go live on Hampshire's website from the 1st of April. In recognition of the fact that not all residents are able to use the internet or telephone services, Hampshire can issue paper permits in circumstances where they are really needed. The request will need to be made via telephone or email, but can be done by a family member or care worker, and Hampshire's parking team will then review the request and come back with a solution that they feel would work best. Hampshire currently operate the My Permit system in 4 other districts of the county and have overcome such problems. For anyone who is particularly worried, I'd urge them to please get in contact with Hampshire's parking team, who will discuss the options with them, and I'm happy to provide these details to any councillors who need them. I would welcome any feedback Councillor Jeans or other councillors have from residents as the updated scheme is rolled out, and if residents experience issues and concerns, we can in the future consider adding a review of on-street parking to an appropriate committee, inviting Hampshire to explain how the service is operating after its first year. Thank you.
Councillor Jeans, do you have a supplementary?
No, I'm very happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move to question number 2 from Councillor Fillimore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I am going to read it. The thousands of viewers of ours on YouTube will appreciate it. Considerable efforts and inputs of numerous volunteers, our residents across the borough, have contributed to the creation, examination and adoption of neighbourhood plans and communities across our borough. These volunteers have given thousands of hours to the scale, complexity and time needed to produce these specific neighbourhood plans. These communities were told that neighbourhood plans would enable them to determine how many homes could be built and where they could be sited within their villages and towns. Therefore, my question is, why are we as the local planning authority allowing developers to override the wishes of our residents who have compiled these neighbourhood plans?
Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Fillimore, for the question. The Council strongly advocates neighbourhood planning and has actively supported the making of 16 plans in the borough to date. So these are an important part of the planning framework determining the planning application and have enabled communities to help shape their locality in their areas. So I commend all the work done by the parish councils and community groups to do these neighbourhood plans and update them on a regular basis. As councillors are aware, the borough currently lacks a 5-year land supply of deliverable housing sites, and the national planning guidance explicitly sets out that when this is the case, the policies relating to housing delivery in local and neighbourhood plans are considered out of date. So the planning authority must therefore determine planning applications in line with national guidance and the title balance. So this effectively means that schemes should be permitted unless the adverse impact outweigh the benefits. But non-housing delivery related policies in neighbourhood plans continue to be used in the determination of planning and applications, and the plans continue to have a planning weight. So the council is working proactively with the development industry to deliver suitable sites which will help towards restoring the land supply position. The adopted local plan is also being updated to develop a robust strategy for meeting housing needs into the future. So support continues to be given to the communities wishing to develop new plans, and also those reviewing and updating existing plans. The up-to-date plans in the borough which meet their indicative housing needs already benefit from 2 years of protection from the land supply position, and government is currently considering extending this to 5 years protection.
Can you wind up, please?
Yeah, therefore, this remains a benefit to local communities in progressing new and updated plans. So as councillors, we should encourage parish councils and community groups to draft neighbourhood plans or update them on a regular basis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Fenimore, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have. Nearly every ward in our borough, whether rural or urban, from Bishop's Green to Old Basin, from Clidston to Kingsclear, have suffered or under threat from unplanned speculative development caused by this Conservative administration's abysmal failure to achieve a 5-year land supply. Can the Cabinet member please inform the Council when we will achieve a 5-year land supply?
Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I've just answered the question earlier, the Council has been working to bring the 5-year land supply to date, and we have just been informed that our 5-year land supply is up to 4.7. So we will be working to make sure that we get to the point where the speculative applications won't be an issue in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Move on to question number 3. Councillor Kuznesko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per the order paper.
Thank you, Councillor Eaches.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. And just say I was not aware that you've contacted me directly about this, and had you, then I'm more than happy to discuss it, and I'm happy to discuss it further at a later date as well. A list of areas that are currently managed for biodiversity improvement is available on the Council's website and the Ecological Emergency web page, and this does confirm that there is a BIS in every ward, and work is ongoing to help grow that and the diversity of wildlife and plants in every ward across the borough. The Council has taken active steps to manage, protect, enhance and restore nature across the borough in a number of ways in line with its green infrastructure strategy. This includes policy setting in the local plan, agreeing the ecological enhancements as part of planning permission, looking after areas of green space management plans and working with partners and volunteers. We have the Council's rangers who work alongside community groups and volunteers to improve and enhance the diversity of plants and animals on over 300 hectares of natural green space. Additional resources have been made available to this team in the coming year to enhance this service and support a greater number of conservation groups and volunteers. Our natural environment team also plays a vital role supporting the delivery of biodiversity enhancements and managing habitats across the borough, including over 80,000 trees, while ensuring ecological biodiversity are taken into account in decision making in all council departments. The new council plan includes a commitment to develop a new biodiversity strategy this year, which will set out how we will seek to protect and enhance biodiversity across the borough. Council teams work closely with volunteers throughout conservation groups such as Natural Basingstoke, as well as partners including the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust through its Wilder Basingstoke and Dean scheme. We have reviewed many of the borough maintained parks, and we are open to explore opportunities to further enhance biodiversity where there is the potential to do so, taking into consideration the value of the potential gain, maintenance access and impact on the site's other functions such as sports, event space or other recreational uses. I have asked officers to contact you to explore possible opportunities for BIS areas in Hill, and I'm happy to attend any meeting in that regard.
Councillor, next one, supplementary? No supplementary. Thank you very much, Councillor Eaches. Question number 4, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Getting to and from town and around the borough is very important to our residents. The borough is constantly growing in population due to factors such as house building. Unfortunately, our transport network has a lot of catching up to do, and many residents who don't drive are relying on buses and taxis. It has come to my and several colleagues' attention that the private hire companies are delivering a low-quality service that is unacceptable. Examples include a resident who had to ask their neighbour to drive them to Southampton Hospital so they did not miss their cancer treatment appointment. The booked car failed to turn up. Other issues include the app showing a confirmed booking, but the car is late or fails to arrive. Alpha and Delta cars have a large monopoly in Basingstoke, and residents are desperate to have a basic facility where they can book a private car that will just turn up on time. I therefore ask the portfolio holder, Councillor Jay Ganesh, for transport, what we can do as a borough to encourage companies such as Uber and Addison Lee to our town and surrounding areas. Thank you.
Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Edwards, for the question. I sympathise with the residents who has been experiencing these delays and unable to book or cancellation from our local taxi company. So I am aware of the issues. This is an issue not just for the Chinham ward, but the pretty much all around the borough, including the ward that I represent. So the licensing authorities, not just us, the all around the country has seen this issue post-COVID in terms of declining number of drivers. So as a borough, we've had 315 licensed drivers pre-COVID, and it dropped drastically. And now we have been steadied, and we have around sort of 285 licensed drivers. But the licensing teams are currently processing 55 new driver applications, and therefore we anticipate that the overall number of licensed drivers will increase above pre-pandemic level, which should lead to a noticeable improvement in the level of service. Our licensing teams have been working closely with the local private hire operator to address issues like driver shortages. Next month, on 17th April, the licensing committee will be considering changes to the current licensing policy, which are intended to make it easier for private hire drivers to obtain license. The licensing teams have also revised all the application paperwork to simplify and clarify the process for new applications. So last year, when I took over this portfolio, I have had these conversations with the heads of service, and they have done a bit of a work around it to find out if there is any app-based operators interested in coming to the borough. But we've been told that the Uber are no longer keen on establishing new operating bases. They are only sort of a version of operating in new towns is to sort of collaborate with another company and operate locally. So they have...
If you could wind up, please.
As an option. So as a borough, I think we should do everything to make sure that we do ensure that connectivity and accessibility for our residents is assured. So I will be asking the officers, not just the solving the driver shortage, but we approach all the app-based operators to welcome to the borough, and if there's a way to find out if they can operate to address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Edwards?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Move to question 5, Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just emphasise the seriousness of this question, this matter, hence the very long question. So you'll be pleased to know, question as per the order paper.
Thank you very much. And it's for the Leader of the Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have a technical answer to read because it's a planning matter, but actually, fundamentally, I think Councillor Tomlin asked me a much more in principle question that says, am I concerned? I think we should all be concerned, frankly. We have all sorts of technologies coming down the track for it to supposedly help us all be more environmentally friendly and to make sure we do the right thing for the planet. And fundamentally, this issue shows us that legislation has to keep up. Technology moves really quickly. and something that could be sold to us as an enormous benefit can have some enormous unintended consequences, which lots of people will be looking for us to protect them from. The legislation doesn't allow us to do that. So do I share Councillor Tomlin's concerns? Absolutely. It's one of the reasons why I sent a letter to the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities and the Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs back in December to support the bill, to put the legislation in place to make sure that we did consult on these planning applications. For the planning applications that are mentioned, of course, we do have legislation that we have to follow today. So it's very important that we determine those planning applications in accordance with the development plan, unless there are material considerations that indicate otherwise. Of course, I think we should all be aware of these 3 sites that are mentioned. One was refused by Development Control Committee. The decision to refuse was then appealed by the applicant, and the Planning Inspectorate allowed the appeal. We all know how frustrating that can be, particularly if we have significant concerns. There is complexity around
just a few seconds, Councillor.
There is a complexity around the absence of regulations on lithium batteries, but I think we should all work really hard to make sure the legislation catches up.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, the supplementary is really, would this council, would the leaders sanction us working with Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Fire Brigade, given the comments that they are making? It's a specific issue about how we could control some construction standards, not about it's bad news we've had these put through planning. It's about our ability just to make things right, to avoid what could be a potentially disastrous environmental impact. So I just would hope that we would be able to embrace the fire brigade, work with them and see if we can get the legislation through, and not so much that as getting it built correctly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think fundamentally, I think we'll need to take some technical advice about what the art of the possible is as far as those plans. I'm sure everybody, if you haven't read it, you should read it. The letter from Neil Odin, the Chief Fire Officer, is truly scary as far as the choices. Should there be a fire at one of these installations, the choices that fire service has, it should worry us all. So absolutely, let's look at the technical details. I haven't got an answer for you, but I'm absolutely happy to ask the officers to make sure we do the work.
Thank you. Question 6, Councillor Slimmon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As printed on the paper, but in addition, could I point out that if the documents aren't available on the public website, the Town Council, of which I'm a member, as a planning consultee, can't actually see what the documentation is about. So it's important that this is live and available to the public and to other people that require it. Otherwise, I'd appreciate the answer to the question. Thank you.
Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. There are several processes involved in publishing documents within the online planning system. The IT solution manages this under the direction of the planning team. The planning team need to ensure that all necessary steps for the documents have been adhered to before it can finally be made available, including redacting the documents for any sensitive information. The IT service have informed me that there was a recent issue with a number of laptops within the organisation, including several staff in the planning team. This impacted their ability to process the documents within the planning system as quickly as they normally would, and is likely the cause of the delays in documents being made available in a timely manner. The IT service has also tested the download function, and it is working as expected, and they believe that this incident may have been related to a single computer, not a system-wide incident. I've been assured that the issues relating to the council laptops was a one-off, and that all impacted laptops were operational within 1 week, with many operational within a few days. The IT team are not aware of any planning team that has long-standing IT issues of the nature described in the question. However, they will be investigating this further with the planning team in the coming days. They will also look to provide them with the alternative means to access information should there be any long delays in the future for staff. I've also been informed that staff can access emails through the webmail if everything else fails.
Thank you, Councillor Slimmon. Supplementary?
Yes, I'm afraid I have a copy of the email that was sent to a resident, which actually contradicts some of that. That in fact, they said that she'd been operating with limited access onto the server for a few weeks, and for getting the opportunity to respond to a member of the public who was waiting for a response to an application. And can I also ask a question? I believe at scrutiny on Tuesday, there was a sign-off for ways of working. I looked at the paper and I couldn't see any reference to whether or not our IT systems were robust and reliable enough to be able to allow people to do exactly working from home. So I hope that that also has been addressed, because I know that you've signed off the ways of working, I believe.
Happy to get the answer, Mr. Mayor. Like all specific, it's not helpful with a member referring to a specific email if that hasn't been shared for anybody to respond to. So I'd appreciate that being shared and we'll get a response.
Mr. Mayor, can I come back?
We're done.
This email was shared with the senior member of the planning team.
Thank you. Move on, question 7. Councillor Momalani.
As per the order, Mayor. Order papers.
Thank you very much. Casichas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These water fountains were installed over 20 years ago to provide a gateway into Basingstoke and the town centre. The water feature was switched on in the spring and summer months, but has been switched off since 2019. Initially, this was in line with COVID restrictions, but this was followed by issues including the corrosion of the equipment in the plant room that powers the fountains and the difficulty of sourcing replacement parts given the age of these. As I'm sure you are aware, the fountains were designed to provide a decorative feature only. We have 2 water play facilities for families to enjoy. One is just a short walk away in Eaststock Park, where there is a paddling pool which is open in the spring and summer months for families to use, and a splash pad is also available at Chilham Park in Popley during this time. A recent inspection has confirmed the significant amount of work and cost that would be involved in repairing and replacing these fountains as they have reached the end of their usable life. We have therefore taken the decision it is not cost effective to repair or replace them. This therefore provides us with an opportunity to look at how this area could contribute to the improvement of the environment in the town centre in the future, while also supporting the council's climate change emergency pledges better. Through our project to create and enhance green routes through parks and open spaces, we are exploring opportunities to improve the facilities at Eaststock Park, which includes water play facilities.
Thank you. Councillor supplementary? No supplementary. Thank you very much. Move on, question number 8. Councillor Tuck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Downhill slope, I'm still going to read it, but I'll try and précis. Basing Fen battery planning application has been fraught with controversy, rightly, given that nationally, with only 100 battery plants operating within the UK, we have already had a major fire, and there are over 300 more plants in the pipeline, 4 of which are within a few miles of here, pre-app or approved. I readily acknowledge that the probability of thermal runaway when the batteries catch fire and explode is low, only 1 in 100 it would seem. But the impact when it does is high, and never more so than when located very close to a watercourse. Caustic smoke will close the Hampshire Clinic Hospital opposite, and our residents up to Sherfield on Loddon or across the town centre will see and feel the effects. This is a new technology that regulatory legislation has yet to catch up with. In my view, it has all the potential to be the next cladding scandal. Our Fire Chief Neil Odin says, whilst we recognise the positive contribution that these types of installations can play in providing solutions to cleaner energy, we remain concerned about the impact of the chosen locations that could have such a detrimental effect on the local environment and important infrastructure should a fire occur. In the event of a fire, our teams would face an impossible choice between protecting the community from a potential toxic or explosive gas plume or applying water that would pollute the watercourse for many years. An impossible choice. A day before the planning expired, a variation was sent to council seeking numerous changes. We mentioned that the legislation is not caught up, but we have discretion as a local authority to decide on what is a minor amendment and what requires a full new planning application. This case has 11 new documents detailing changes. In particular, it changes the footprint and area of the red line of the site. How many more aspects does this application need to change before being classified as a new planning application? 1. Can you assure me that the interests of the hospital, residents and the natural environment are paramount in this application? 2, will the leader and portfolio holder personally review this application? And finally, 3, how are we going to demonstrate that this council is not legally and morally negligent when faced with an environmental catastrophe and danger to hospital patients, to residents and our environment? Thank you.
Thank you. Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Before I respond, and it will be technical, I'm afraid, I would just like to put on record my thanks to Councillor Tuck for her passion and commitment to this subject. Doesn't go amiss, certainly in my inbox as far as emails and the conversations that we have. As set out in my answer in the earlier question, I am of course aware of the work that Basingstoke MP Dame Maria has done to table the lithium-ion open brackets fire safety and environmental permits close bracket build 2022, seeking to make local fire services statutory consultees for battery storage planning applications. And I know Councillor Tuck has been doing lots of work behind the scenes with Dame Maria and for the granting of environmental permits. It is not currently a statutory requirement to do so, but in the meantime, as a matter of practice, this council does consult Hampshire Fire and Rescue Services on all such applications. In relation to the Basing Fen site in particular, the matter regarding implementation of the original planning permission is subject to a current enforcement investigation, which has yet to be completed. With regards to the amended application of the Basing Fen site, the scale and nature of the application is such that it can be considered as an amendment to the original planning permission, but the process for the application in relation to consultation, notification of residents and ultimately decision making is the same as if the application had been made in full.
Thank you. Councillor Tuck, supplementary. Thank you very much. Move on. Question number 9, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. Parents across Basingstoke have been disappointed and left stressed and anxious since they received confirmation of where their child has been allocated a place at secondary school in September. Myself, Councillor Miller and Councillor Vox have received many emails highlighting the issues parents and children will face in September. In Chinham, 4-lane school have had a temporary hut in their grounds since 2019 and this will be removed later this year. Why is it there? It is because there is a huge bulge year due to an above average birth rate in 2011 and 2012. Therefore, Hampshire County Council knew additional places for secondary intake for 2023 would be needed. They have clearly failed to make a provision for this. The result is children from Chinham and Sheffield Park are going to have to travel to Aldworth School and even further to the Clear, which is 18 miles away. Getting to Aldworth would mean catching 2 buses to complete the 6.5-mile journey, which will take over an hour. The Clear has advised parents that it offers no after-school clubs, as many students get to school to and from on the bus, as they live so far away. This will deprive our young residents of opportunities that closer to home schools offer. The recent creation of new places in Brighton Hill Community School has brought some positive change to parents, but does not go far enough. Hampshire County Council are asking parents to just follow the appeals process, which fails to address the root cause of the problem. Can I therefore ask the leader of the council to urgently request Hampshire County Council review this year's admissions and make the necessary changes? This could include providing an appropriate transport where required, such as a school bus from Chinham and Sheffield Park to Aldworth. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader of Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. For your information, I have contacted the relevant officers at HCC regarding the position and I'm awaiting a response on the status of any reply. I'm sure my request has been welcomed by the officers because, of course, it was school places that initially got me into local politics personally myself. So I have a long and colourful history with the officers when it comes to strategic place planning at the County Council. I will, of course, Councillor Edwards, let you know as soon as I have an update. Hampshire County Council are already reviewing the position with schools and additional provision since the day of the offer. I would also just like to thank, because it's always in the detail, isn't it, for the Chinham councillors for just sharing with me the details as far as where the schools are, how far children and parents will need to travel, and how difficult those journeys will be.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, supplementary.
I do, thank you. Well, thank you, Leader. In the coming years, it is likely hundreds of new homes will be built in the east of Basingstoke. We have no local secondary school, and the catchment schools seem to be unable to accommodate for the population as it is. Can you ask for assurance and a plan from Hampshire County Council on how they are linking their projections of population growth with the borough's local plan? Thank you.
Thank you. Leader.
Thank you very much. I agree and want to suggest a meeting with Hampshire County Council to address this issue. We spent a lot of time, particularly in EPH, talking about the growth of Basingstoke and what those growing pains have been. I think a bulge year shows what those pains are, because an ordinary bulge year in many boroughs wouldn't be quite as painful unless you have had the growth that we have had in the past. So from the council's perspective, HCC Education Department are a key stakeholder in the local plan process and have been involved in and directly fed into the site assessment process for the local plan update, which considers relevant site-related factors, including the impact of development and any infrastructure constraints and any required mitigation. This looks at sites both individually and cumulatively. Their input will be required throughout the process as the strategy develops. Any required infrastructure will be reflected in the local plan site allocation policies. Won't that be an exciting read, ladies and gentlemen? Information on the delivery rates associated with new developments is provided to HCC to inform their decision making now and going forwards.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 15, questions to the Chair of Cabinet and or committee. Are there any? You're waving your hand, Councillor Lee. Careful.
You just bought it.
That's how you get called forward. No, right. That concludes the council meeting. Before you all rush off, this is my last council meeting as chairing it as the mayor until we get to mayor making. We've all got to rush off and do our election bit for the next 6 or 7 weeks. All I want to do is thank every member who's been in this council chamber during my year. One or two have needed a slight bit of guidance, as I'll leave it at that. I would also like to thank the senior leadership team, because they've helped me with guidance at the top table here, and also Democratic Services, who, if you don't know, provide an awful lot of support behind the scenes. So it's a big thank you from me. It's a bit of a wet night out there. I hope it's eased off. Thank you very much, and see you in May.